Conscious citizen.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this London Planning Committee meeting here at Shirehall today. We are not expecting a fire drill today. In the event of the alarm sounding, please leave the building and gather at the front of the building. I'm obliged to tell you that this meeting is being live streamed and recorded. But I'd also ask you to make sure you've got your mobile phones restored in order that those watching the live stream know who is speaking. Members and officers introduce themselves prior to speaking. To ensure the members and the committee at all points raised by the public speakers are properly heard, I must advise you that I will not tolerate any disruptive behaviour. This is a meeting held in public, not a public meeting, and if such behaviour takes place and persists, I will adjourn the meeting. I shall now ask members of the committee to introduce themselves.
Mark Williams, councillor representing Highly. Mark Williams, councillor representing Highly.
Roger Evans, councillor from the London division.
Councillor Tony Parsons representing Basin Hill, Colham and Sutton.
Councillor Nigel Lumbey from Albrighton.
Councillor Caroline Bagnall from Broseley.
Sorry.
Councillor Paul Wynne representing Prince.
Right hand.
Councillor Ed Potter representing Lowton.
Andy Boddington, Ludlow North.
Hilary Love, councillor for Church Stratton and Craven Arms.
Councillor Nick Hignott representing Ray Valley Ward.
Clint Mullen, new planning manager.
Graham French, principal planner.
David Evans, councillor for Church Stratton and Craven Arms, and also the chair of this committee.
Kim Brown, solicitor.
Tim Ward, committee officer.
We have apologies for absence. Apologies have been received from Councillor Nigel Hartin and Councillor Mark Williams is substituting for him. Councillor Christopher Lee from Bridge North, he sends his apologies, and Councillor Paul Wynne is his substitute. Councillor Roger Heavens has replaced Councillor Heather Kidd as a member of this committee. Next item on the agenda is minutes from the meeting held on the 27th of September. Now, there's one slight adjustment to the minutes, which is 65 Brick Farm Street. It's to be noted that it was the best and most volatile land instead of grade 2 listed land, agricultural land.
Best and most versatile.
Best and most versatile should be replaced instead of grade 2 listed. So with amendment to the minutes, I'll propose the minutes.
Chair.
Thank you. All in favor?
Chair, may I amend your amendment?
Yep.
I think the minutes of 65 should read that consideration of the application be deferred to allow the applicant to investigate whether it is possible to remove the best and most versatile agricultural land from this application and to consult with the local community on revised plans. That's a matter of record.
No, that wasn't in the records.
It is, if you listen to the tape.
Right.
Would you like me to play you the recording?
Just a minute, I'll ask our solicitor.
I'll second that, Chairman, as an amendment.
Okay.
It is there on the tape, and as it's been circulated to members, I think it is minuted that where it is, and it appears on the tape.
Right. Okay.
The agreed minutes and the draft decision are compatible. The draft decision that we issued did not require formal public consultation. Notwithstanding that, additional information that the applicant provided has been on the website for the last 10 days, at least two weeks.
Chairman, if I may, it is part of the motion that agreed, and it does appear like that in the actual recording that is made and is public property of the meeting.
Right, well, I'll accept that amendment, all right? Proposed by councillor Bollington, seconded by councillor Lloyd. Thank you. All those who exclude that amendment in the minutes, please. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8. That's carried then as we amend the minutes accordingly. Thank you, councillor Bollington. Public questions. Any public questions?
No public questions, Chair.
Disclosure pecuniary interest, please. Anybody to disclose your interest? Councillor Roger.
Thank you, Chairman. It isn't pecuniary, but I wish to make it clear that I am a member of Oswestry Parish Council. I was present when the application for that parish council was discussed, but my mind is open and I'm willing to listen to any discussions today.
Thank you,
Thank you, Chairman.
Any others? Councillor Hignett, please.
Thank you, Chair. Item 6, proposed holiday let Kevin of Ashdale, Ponsonby Hill. I'm the ward member. I will be speaking on that and then leave the room.
Thank you very much. Right. No further ado, we go into the agenda. Brickhouse Farm Greek. Graham, please.
Thank you, Chair. Could we have the first slide, please? And again, just to get to the site layout plan. Next. Thank you. So at the September committee meeting, members resolved to defer this application to allow the applicant to investigate whether it would be possible to remove the best and most versatile agricultural land from the scheme. We've obviously had a further amendment which relates to public consultation, which I will refer to subsequently. The applicant, Bluefield Limited, has since conducted a full technical and design review to identify which areas of the proposed solar farm could be redesigned to enable removal of solar modules from the best and most versatile land. Following this assessment, Bluefield has been able to remove a significant area of solar modules from 4 parcels of best and most versatile land, totaling 15.4 hectares or 6 acres or 6 hectares in accordance with their agricultural consultants' calculation. So the applicant advises that the redesign means that 95% of the solar farm is now on grade 3B land, which is not best and most versatile. Of the remaining best and most versatile land, which has been taken out of solar array use, 15.4 acres are allocated as food opportunity areas, i.e. to remain in food production, with the remaining 6 acres allocated as additional biodiversity enhancement areas. If we look at the plan, you can see that there are buff areas in the middle of the site surrounded by the blue array, 3 in a line towards the top end and 1 at the southern tip, sort of the South African location, as it were. Now, 3 of those are allocated for food production, food opportunity areas, and the one at the sort of top centre is, as I understand it, a biodiversity enhancement area. The areas are linked by hedgerow corridors, with hedgerows being retained, so there is access to them independently of the solar arrays. Just go back on this. The amendments have resulted in a loss of 5 megawatts of solar farm capacity, according to the applicant, whilst retaining a capacity of 45 megawatts, which the applicant advises is sufficient to power 13,500 homes. Bluefield, the applicant, has contacted Harper Adams Agricultural College to explore undertaking a major research project at the site. This would explore the options for growing food crops both within the solar array area itself and also within the food opportunity area, or at least in terms of the arrays to maximise potential agricultural yield, so shade tolerant grass species and optimising grazing opportunity. So it's envisaged that Bluefield will sponsor 1 or more master's students and potentially a PhD student, together with commissioning a wider research project from Harper Adams. The company believes this would be a groundbreaking research which would provide a benchmark for future solar projects in the county and nationally in terms of securing food production in such sites. Already the company is beginning to apply this principle to other applications it's applying for nationally. So the update report incorporates additional policy guidance on from the National Planning Policy Framework relating to best and most versatile land and solar developments. This highlights that whilst local planning authorities must recognise the economic and other benefits of best and most versatile land under paragraph 174, there's no automatic national policy requirement to apply a sequential test with respect to agricultural land quality when determining solar farm applications. Footnote 56 of the NPPF advises in this respect that the requirement to apply a sequential test relates specifically to plan making. So the update report includes a supplementary planning condition which secures the productive use of the food opportunity areas within the site for that purpose of food production. A representation from CPRE was circulated individually to members yesterday and is reproduced in the late reps reports. The applicant has unfortunately had insufficient time to place their response in the late reps report, but has subsequently responded. I can read it out. It is online. I'm not going to go into great detail, but I think suffice to say that there are many points of fact that the applicant is disagreeing with in relation to the CPRE submission. I think there are, obviously we need to recognise the applicant has their own qualified agricultural consultant who has obviously a professional integrity interest in ensuring that the information that they provide is appropriate and accurate. But I won't read the full thing out, but it is on our online register. So additionally, further representation being received from the consultant acting on behalf of the Greek Parish Meeting, and Greek itself has provided a traffic count in a further representation, and these again are uploaded visible on the planning portal. Traffic count records higher local traffic levels than those recorded previously by the applicant. In response, the applicant has provided a email chain as part of the supplementary information which confirms that the council as highway authority was fully acceptant of the methodology proposed when the survey was undertaken. So it's for members to determine what weight to give to any supplementary highway information that may be received. So it should be, yes. So in conclusion on this, and I'm not going to go into all of the dialogue that we discussed at the previous meeting where we discussed the wider context of this, because this has come back to committee specifically because of the agricultural issue. So the conclusion, it's considered that the committee is instructed to reduce the effects on best and most versatile land within the site has been positively answered by the applicant. The amended proposals succeed in significantly reducing the effects on best and most versatile land within the site. And through the proposed link with Harbour Adams College, they've also got the potential to serve as an exemplar for management of best B&MV land at solar sites nationally. I just want to dwell, if I may, slightly, Chair, on the amendment to the recommendation. The amendment basically stipulates that there shall be community consultation on any amended scheme. Now, I haven't had the opportunity to read the actual transcript from that, but in terms of community consultation, the council's principal mechanism is its online planning portal, and the additional documents have been uploaded in good time for the public to assess the effect of the amendments. I would additionally point out that the amendments actually reduced the amount of arrays, the arrays being, in terms of the quantity, being a principal cause for objection, as they are reduced, and the level of productivity and potential mitigation and benefit in terms of how we're dealing with best and most versatile agricultural land, the applicant, is also being addressed. So in that context, it's not as if the scheme is seeking to extend its area or something that would be a highly material justification for formal consultation. Normally where formal consultation occurs, it is a decision of fact and degree for the officer to take. I'm not sure that the instruction to commit to a public consultation was sufficiently explicit that it would have required a formal reconsultation process. We have to recognise, Chair, that the county is as planning authority, under an obligation to make timely decisions in relation to these types of application, and can be vulnerable to appeals against non-determination if they are not. So thank you, Chair. That's all I want to say.
Right, we have 4 speakers on this. The first speaker is Peter Ryder, please. Press the right hand button, sir. And you have 3 minutes to address the committee. Thank you.
Thank you. On the public consultation point, may I just make this point? 10 days is hardly time for anybody to consult anyone else on this issue. Going on to what I was planning to say, there's a lot of evidence in the objection to this proposal, including evidence which accompanied my objection, which I sent round to everyone yesterday. I'll use acres, not hectares. Professor Alder, in his evidence to the Parliamentary Committee on Land Use in April this year, said that UK agriculture is losing 96,000 acres a year and rising. He said that in 2021, bioenergy crops and solar farms accounted for the loss of 445,000 acres of arable land. And it's predicted we will soon have lost another 900,000. Is it sensible to counter those words by suggesting we import more food, or by making comparisons with golf courses, which unlike solar farms, are not covered by glass and metal? We objectors know that your officers only have so much time in their day. Their ability to check the accuracy of the information they get from applicants is limited by available time. By contrast, the objectors had the time, for instance, to prove that Bluefield were misinformed when they said farmers farm to the lowest grade of land in a parcel, to prove that Bluefield were misinformed when they said Brickhouse farm only grows potatoes from the Cairns oven chips, and to prove that the traffic survey conducted on behalf of Bluefield was inadequate. But time alone wasn't enough when we faced Bluefield's soil survey and land classification. We knew that the difference between 3A and 3B land is finely balanced, but we didn't have the money to commission our own survey. All we could do was talk to people who knew the land, so that's what we did. And I believe we demonstrated that this land is far too productive for it to be damned merely because of the 3B attribution. At the last meeting of this committee, you put down a marker. You are unlikely to allow solar farms on good agricultural land. During the discussion of the Ledditch application, it was stated that grade 3A land can yield crops of 10 tonnes a hectare, which is 4 tonnes an acre. Witnesses have described similar crop yields at Brickhouse Farm, between 3.5 and 4.5 tonnes an acre. And in the email from a local feed merchant, the farm manager is reported as saying that this year's yield was 3.8 tonnes per acre, and that was despite the drought. If you compare the two sites and consider only crops, the potential for the 70 acres at Ledditch is about 280 tonnes, whereas for the 130 odd acres at Brickhouse, it's approaching 500 tonnes. As a long-time litigation lawyer, I'm confident in submitting that a refusal of this application will be consistent with the precedent you set when you refused the application at Ledditch. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Anybody got any questions, Mr. Ryder? No, thank you very much. Now it's Mr. Tim Waller, please, from the Parish Council. You also have 3 minutes, sir, to address the committee. Thank you.
Chair, the first thing I'd like to say is that a portal is not enough for consultation in such a huge and very complex proposal. For instance, why was the GPM never consulted about the EIA or the people of Greet? An EIA has worried us since the very beginning that it hasn't been done, and has worried our legal advisors as well. An EIA on such a huge proposal is surely necessary. I would like to say that also Alison Morgan has put a statement on the portal, but it was also sent individually to councillors. She's the widow of the late tenant farmer at Brickhouse Farm, and it gives a clear history of Brickhouse Farm, its crop produce and its manure fertilising process. It's employed 3 generations of her farming family, creating food production for over 8 decades since the 40s. She states it could simply not be done on poor quality land. She strongly urges the council to not enable Brickhouse Farm to no longer be agriculturally productive and deprive the local area of rural employment. At the last meeting, Bluefields and the planning officer said these fields were farmed to the lowest grade of land. As Peter Ryder has just said, this assumption was completely dismissed by 3 local farmers, one of whom is sitting 3 rows back in the middle behind me. He's asked me to state that he has worked on those fields all his life. He has never farmed to the lowest grade. He said you farm in rotation according to the current state of the soil and the season. He also states those crop field yields were 3.5 to 4.5 tonnes per acre. Common knowledge, he said. To back this up, GPM tried to get productivity records for Brickhouse Farm, but the people that have these records were not willing to cooperate. Productivity has been an issue for weeks now, but the applicants have not produced any actual records to refute what we, the objectors, are saying. Surely they would if they could. They have business relationships with everyone involved in Brickhouse Farm. It beggars belief that they can't get hold of these records. GPM suggests perhaps that they don't want these records to be disclosed because they confirm what so many objectors say. Brickhouse Farm is a very productive farm on very productive land. The figures of the yields prove it. There's been no further mention of the gas and oil pipe that runs straight across the middle of the proposed land. This will need access for maintenance. The solar farm would have to be split into 2 sections. There's also an electric cable which runs diagonally straight across the map that you can see on the board there. That hasn't been mentioned either. The use of the professor at Harper Adams for research. Absolute tokenism. Chair. GPM spoke to the professor in question. He does not endorse the use of his name in debate over a solar farm proposal. So Pegasus has come up with another unworkable transport plan, a one-way system, a traffic officer and a notice board dictating residents where they can and can't drive. The wildlife simply would be destroyed. And finally, councillor, that gentleman sitting there, he symbolises everything that this application would destroy. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions, Mr. Walton? Sorry. No. Okay, thank you very much, sir. Thank you. Now the local member, Richard Hopper, please. Extra Richard Hopper. Thank you, and you have 5 minutes to address the committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, committee. I can only concur with what's previously been said with regards to consultation. I've received none since this came before committee a few days ago. So consultation has been non-existent since. I feel obliged to correct officers with regards to farming to the lowest land grade. Farmers know their land best. We've got Ed here, I've known Ed for a long time. I welcome his experience and that he brings to this committee. Farmers do know their land best. And most farmers use an agronomist to aid good yields and to maintain some profit margin. Mapping of fields and the use of GPS takes any guesswork out of this, allowing correct use of lime, N, P and K, trace elements, etc. Land classification grades only refer to the soil type, not the fertility. You've heard Alison Morgan. I've known Alison a long time. I was in Young Farmers with her late husband and a brother. Alison Morgan from Brickhouse Farm. It has been farmed in a rotation using dairy and beef. It has always been that farmers try to leave the land in a better condition than when they take it on.
And that is very, 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 very true, and certainly true in the Morgan's case. Throughout the war years, when food security was vital, you could lose your farm for not farming in a rotation. Sadly, many have abandoned this, putting profit before good husbandry. When fertiliser was cheap, now fertiliser costs have doubled in the last 12 months. Ed will probably can confirm one way, eight to £900 a tonne. Costs have doubled, and added to fuel costs, cultivation costs that have made its productivity and less viable on land that has been put in permanent arable production, some for over 50 years. Plus, much of this land falls within grade 3A and above. Any agronomist will tell you that grade 3B land farmed right can outperform 3A land and above. And that is certainly true. We have a duty to protect food security, not just for the UK. We have a moral duty globally to produce food. As a country, this is what we do, and not rely on imports, adding to hunger in many parts of the world. And it breaks my heart what I see coming forward in Somalia and other parts of the world. Bluefield has removed just 15.4 acres, still leaving just over 6 acres of grade 3 land. They have done the bare minimum. So now Bluefields are saying 95% of solar is now set on 3B land. In their words, 3B land is low grade, of low value. This is not the case. This is, the proof is there. It's unquestionable. Turning 3B land into solar and trying to square it by saying it will be fine because you will be able to graze sheep will only achieve low quality grazing and upset the balance for other livestock producers. It is envisaged that Bluefield will sponsor student research. I'm all in favour of research and development. Maybe the industry should have invested in this before, and instead of advertising and lobbying farmers and not the expense of and hopefully not at the expense of community benefit. I just lead you on your permission, Chair. This committee has had no solar training. We did have an IEA briefing meeting last night, and thanks to Claire Wild for her input there. Bitterly did have an environmental impact assessment, a 12 megawatt scheme. This is a 50 megawatt scheme. There is a real risk that this scheme is going to come back judicial review. Don't take the easy options. This council needs to work harder to ensure that we do reach the targets set within our climate emergency. But this is not the location. I urge you to go against officer's recommendation and refuse this application. Thank you.
Any questions for Councillor Upper, please? No. Thank you very much. Okay, let's go on. Jonathan Selwyn, please. That's the applicant. Jonathan, you have 3 minutes to address the committee. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Jonathan Selwyn, and I'm the Managing Director of Bluefield Development, the applicant. I noticed that in the presentations we've just heard that there was very little mention of the climate emergency and no mention of the cost of living crisis or the energy crisis that we're facing. It was noted that fertiliser costs have doubled and high energy costs are really causing a problem for farmers. Therefore, farmers are also faced with a cost of living crisis and an energy crisis. Solar is the lowest cost, quickest to deploy energy source. At the moment, while we sit here, I just checked the National Grid app, 14% of the UK's electricity is being provided by solar. That means That's energy that's displacing what we formerly got from Russia, the Middle East, and other high carbon sources. We're not facing a food security emergency in this country. We've never been self-sufficient in food. The soil doesn't allow it, the climate doesn't allow it, but we have been self-sufficient in energy, and that's what we need to get back to. Since the last committee meeting, there's been a great deal of discussion in the media about solar farms and food security. It's led to a very wide consensus amongst a wide range of newspapers and think tanks from all parts of the political spectrum. Both they and we agree that solar energy helps to address the pressing energy challenges we face as a country, and it doesn't in any way threaten food security. The government's own food security task force reported last year that the biggest threat to food security actually was from climate change. That report didn't once mention solar farms as a threat to food security. In any case, we're not taking the land out of food production. We've allocated the food opportunity areas, which means that we're now only using 5% of BMV land, but we're going to graze in the rest of the farm as well. And I note that one of the previous farmers said that this land was used previously for raising cattle and grazing sheep. We're going to return it to sheep grazing, and therefore the whole of the site will be in agricultural production and, very importantly, in energy production as well. We have talked to Harper Adams University about doing some groundbreaking research, but they've asked me to point out that their potential involvement in this research does not imply an endorsement of this planning application, as they are neutral in such matters. We're happy to accept the proposed planning conditions that commit us to the research and also commit us to these food production areas. The application has a recommendation for approval and it has no statutory objections. And I hope that you can now support this project, which would contribute significantly to Shropshire's climate change targets. And I'm happy to take any further questions.
Thank you. Councillor Boddington, please.
Thank you, Chair. Have you conducted any more consultation with the community since the last meeting?
I spoke to Peter Ryder at Greet Parish meeting, and we agreed that we would reconvene pending the result of today's planning committee meeting. I note that it wasn't on the recommendation for deferral that we've had to engage in more consultation, and we've had a very short time to completely redesign the site from an engineering perspective to maintain its safety, engineering integrity and economic viability, but also to make sure that the food opportunity areas we could access once the solar farm was built. So we've spent all our time redesigning the site, and we weren't aware that we had to reconsult on it.
Thank you. Councillor, please.
Thank you, Chairman. It was mentioned by one of the speakers, environmental impact assessment, EIA. I know there's a training session for councillors yesterday. I wasn't able to get to it, but I spent the morning reading it up, and I see in the government documents for it, it says when an environmental impact assessment should be done to identify, predict and evaluate the economic, environmental and social impact of development activities. Then under Schedule 2, it says energy industry, industrial installations for the production of electricity, steam and hot water. The area of the development exceeds 0.5 hectares. Have you ever done an environmental impact assessment? Should not be one done for this. It is almost an industrial site with 50 acres. It is very big.
Yes. So what we have to do as part of the application process is apply for a screening request from the local authority. And with that request, we put a great deal of detail in about the proposal. And the planning officer has to decide whether it comes within the requirement to conduct an EIA. I should say that we own 107 solar farms. We've never had to conduct an EIA on any of them, and a number of them are this kind of size. We've got several solar farm applications in at the moment in different local authorities, and we haven't had to conduct an EIA on any of those. But I'll defer to the planning officer to explain why this didn't require an EIA. But I should say we've carried out a very large number of environmental wildlife biodiversity studies. For example, it shows there would be 40% biodiversity net gain in this project. And so we've had to carry out a lot of investigations. I'd like to refute the suggestion that wildlife will be damaged or killed. There's no evidence that solar farms do that. In fact, they enhance biodiversity, and there's a lot of evidence from the RSPB to show that. But I'll defer to the planning officer.
You want to come back to the Richard? Yeah.
Yeah, we did issue a EIA screening opinion. I can give you the reference number, which is on the online portal. It was the third. We received it on the 30th of November last year. It would have been determined about a month later. I can give you the exact date. The number was 2105628 SCR. We received a great deal of information from Bluefields. We looked at each individual element with reference to the tests provided in Schedule 3 of the EIA Regulations 2017, because the scheme did not fall into the criteria where it automatically constitutes Schedule 1 EIA development. So we look at the qualifying criteria, and as Councillor Evans indicates, that it relates to Schedule 2. It is more than half a hectare in size. So that means that the trigger for EIA assessment was invoked. We then looked at the guidance in Section 3 of the regulations, which indicates that EIA is more likely if you're dealing with significant environmental effects, which can be cross-boundary or affecting things like treble SIs or areas of outstanding natural beauty. In this particular case, the site was deemed to be sufficiently far from the AONB, 2.5 kilometres, that it didn't invoke any EIA criteria for from that sort of nationally significant designation. There were no treble SIs that were in the immediate vicinity. There were some listed buildings which are a heritage designation, but there weren't any Grade 1 listed buildings in the visual envelope of the site. There weren't any scheduled ancient monuments. We went through other considerations like drainage, ecology, soils, and whilst there are undoubtedly local issues, there aren't any significant national issues that would trigger the requirements in Schedule 3 of the EIA Regulation 2017. So yes, it is a fairly sizable solar park, 65 hectares, but the issues it raises are more of a local nature, and they don't impact on issues of nationally protected or internationally protected designations. So our screening response was that it didn't require screening. What I would say, however, is that the application is accompanied by a significant number of reports which cover information equivalent to that which should have been required under EIA. The only issue that is not a requirement that has, which an EIA would have required is consideration of alternatives. And there's also a stronger element of community engagement expected. But in this case, the applicant has formally engaged in pre-app liaison with the local community, and that liaison continues at the moment with Mr. Selwyn's reference to his dialogue recently with Mr. Ryder. So basically, we concluded it did not require EIA, and all the appropriate tests were addressed, and the screening response from the council is visible to any member of the public that wishes to view it on our online register using the reference number I've just provided.
Thank you. You finish your comment, or do you want to come back?
Jim, I've finished with the speaker, but I will want to progress this with the officers in a few minutes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, sir. Well, Councillor Boddington, please.
Thank you, Chair. I begin with a technical query to officers. Much has been made of the proposal to involve Harper Adams in a research project related to this. However, it does not strike me that's necessary to make the development acceptable. So is it material consideration?
Can I answer that, Kim?
Can I respond?
Yeah, we can respond to Graham, yeah.
It's a good question. But I think that when we are seeking to mitigate a concern of the committee in relation to best and most versatile agricultural land, and there is no previous precedent for this, I have to recognise that solar industry is only about 20 years old in this country, and it only became sort of relatively prevalent about 10 years ago. So in terms of research into the ability to optimise productivity of agricultural land within solar arrays, there isn't the research. So I would contend that it is necessary in order to inform the mitigation that is being proposed. And not only that, but it has clearly got a wider national significance, because if there is the ability to improve the management of best and most versatile land, and indeed all agricultural land within solar arrays, by optimising the growth of shade-tolerant species that will support sheep grazing in a highly productive way, by identifying a sort of photovoltaic, it's agrivoltaic, that's the word that we're looking at, the symbiosis of agricultural activity and energy generation. How much better if we can actually achieve optimum productivity through these research processes, and at the same time achieve the key national objective of energy resilience. So I would say, yes, it is relevant. And we are in Shropshire are at the forefront insofar as the new tranche of non-feed-in tariff generated applications which rely on economies of scale. And we haven't reached the situation until now where the larger scale solar scheme can support themselves without any public subsidies. And now we're starting to see, we have energy resilience, we have food resilience, these big issues of our times. And Shropshire just so happens to be there at the cusp of this at the moment because of the number of applications we've got coming in. So I think it's appropriate that a potential reconciliation of these issues can emerge from the applications that we are currently considering.
If I may summarise that rather long speech in one sentence, that the research project is relevant but not material. Nothing that you said suggests it's material in planning terms. Moving on, the recommendation which we agreed earlier in this meeting was that the developer would consult with the community. We heard that has not happened. And this is quite critical. Now, I'm not quite criticising the developer here because, as you know, there's an error in the minutes, plus the video was not available for 7 days. It's withdrawn the day after the meeting because of libelous comments made at the last meeting, and it had to be re-edited. Didn't reappear for a week. And of course, by then, I think the next day, the committee papers were published. And that, I think, is a flaw in process. Okay, it's just one of those things. We've never had that before. Nevertheless, the consultation hasn't happened. And that's critical. If we are going to have solar farms in place, we can't do it when we're at war with the community. It's simply not right. I would like to reinforce Richard Huffer's comments about the way land is farmed. I've talked to a lot of farmers around Ludlow since the last meeting, and they say it's nonsense to say you farm to the lowest grade. You get out there and start farming, and you're on GIS, you've got all the computerized data, and you change your farming methods, the amount of fertilizer you put on the soil as you go along. And you don't have to do it manually. It's now a system. So this is good land, as so many people have said. I am concerned about the lack of an EIA. I know it's an officer judgment, but this is a huge application. It's really big and a very sensitive location. That, I think, means that we don't really understand the impact of it all. I am concerned about highways issue. Now we've had late data about having banksmen and everything else on these narrow lanes. And these are incredibly narrow lanes. So I think that's going to be hugely disruptive. And finally, coming to the footpaths, this has a major impact on the number of footpaths. Now, if you live in that area and walk in that area, you will know this site and just how much it will jar. You walk on this pleasant countryside, which is why you come to South Shropshire. That's why I moved to South Shropshire. You walk in this pleasant countryside, and then suddenly it's like you're on an industrial estate. You know, I think there are two options for us. I won't make a proposal yet. That we either defer this for the developer to do the consultation we agreed at the last meeting, or we reject it.
Councillor Evans, please.
Thank you, Chairman. If I can progress the environmental impact assessment, I'm grateful to officers for circulating a video of the training session that was held yesterday. I've viewed some of it, but not all of it, because it is of some length. And there's one question asked there: when should an environmental impact assessment? And the consultant actually gave an answer. And if one reads the government ones, and as I said right at the earlier on, environmental impact is a tool used to assess the significant effects of a project or development proposal on the environment. EIAs make sure that project decision makers think about the likely effects on the environment at the earliest possible time and aim to avoid, reduce or offset. And then there are three sections below that: to identify, predict and evaluate the economic, environment and social impact of development activities, to provide information on the environmental consequences for decision making, and to promote environmentally sound and sustainable development through the identification. They are important points, and as I say, in Schedule 2, it mentions electricity generation and 0.5 acres. In the answer that was given before to that question, there was no question about size. When are we going to ask for an environmental impact assessment? When it's 100 acres, 1,000 acres, or 5 acres, or 1 acre? 50 acres is an industrial size, 50 megawatts. I worked in the generation industry, and when I was an apprentice, one of the power stations I worked at produced 5 megawatts. I know size is a lot greater these days, but the environmental impact it could have, I don't know. And I think it had to be a judgment call. And where is that judgment made? I think this committee needs to give some indication of when it feels that environmental impact assessment should be made. There are training sessions being set up because the council has not yet got a policy. So pending that, I think this is of a size where an impact assessment should be asked for. Thank you, Chairman.
Yeah, under the council's scheme of delegation, the responsibility for determining EIAs and whether or not a project meets the specification for EIA rests with officers. It isn't identified as a committee issue. So in terms of the criteria where EIA may be required, I draw, for instance, one of the recent one we had was Iron Bridge Power Station, where the power station being demolished and it's been reconstructed. Members will be fully familiar with that site. In that instance, Travel SI coming up very close, within 50 metres of the boundary of the site, ancient woodlands. There was significant flooding issues, which were potentially of a wider than just local basis. And the scale of the site was significant, but there have to be basically at least one national designation that could be significantly adversely affected. In this case, we don't have a treble SI that could be affected. There's no source receptor relationships with them. I think the nearest one may be the the river team, and I'd have to check that, but we checked this very carefully at the time that the EIA that the screening response was issued. So yes, there are instances where these things are required. It is not necessarily simply a matter of size. It is a matter of context and proximity to environmental designations protected at national level.
Thank you. Councillor Wynne, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just to put things straight, the wildlife, they talk about wildlife, losing wildlife. That is not true. It does enhance wildlife. The ground's not being turned over. It's not being mown. It's being grazed, just grazed. And they do shelter under the things. So it enhances wildlife. It doesn't get rid of it. It really doesn't. This is a balance between electricity, clean electricity, and farming food production. That's the argument today, as far as I can see. This is producing a lot of electricity. What was it? 13,500 houses. That's a big town. And 150 acres, not 50 acres, by the way. I think it is, isn't it? There's one by me, which is going up as we speak. I was watching it through the window this morning. I was reading the papers. That's 156 acres. It's going to produce the same electricity. That'll do with church, full stop, and the surrounding area. There's another one down the road. There's one on me. We've got more than enough to power almost a quarter of North Shropshire. It is the way forward. We have to have clean energy. We've got to produce our own electricity, and this is the way forward as far as I'm concerned. There's all different ways of doing it, but this is the cleanest and the most effective for the land use. Thank you.
Councillor Lumley, please.
I say to folk that I'm actually pro solar farms, and then you see where they want to put solar farms and you see the restrictions and you think, no, they shouldn't be there. Now, we turned down the other site last month, which was about 75% BMV. This site hasn't got that BMV in it. And so where we start drawing the line is if you look at national framework and SANDEV, it talks about you should avoid using BMV land. This site, therefore, doesn't have that protection. I don't agree with my member colleagues about the EIA. Certainly our training yesterday, I wouldn't like to be involved with that decision making at all. The experts, the officers are the ones for that. And more importantly, all the case stated is that once that decision's been made, then it's highly unlikely it's going to be overturned unless it's absolutely fundamentally out of kilter. And so I think you may be going up the wrong thing, EIA. So at the moment, and I'm going to listen to it all, but I'm more inclined to support the officer recommendation.
Councillor Parsons, please.
Yes, I mean, I'm no expert on EIA, but I went on the training session yesterday, and my recollection of that was that if you need an EIA because of an environmental impact, the examples that we were quoted was a nuclear power plant creating nuclear waste or emissions into the atmosphere from other heavy industrial usage. This doesn't look to me as though it's going to give that sort of an environmental impact, and so I'm in agreement. I don't think that this should have necessarily had an EIA on it.
Thank you. Another speakers, please. Anyone willing to make a proposal? Councillor Wynne.
Thank you, Chair. I'm in favour of this. I propose we go with the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Boddington.
Thank you, Chair. I make a counter proposal or an amendment that we actually go against the officer proposal, and I can give the reasons for rejection.
So I just ask if Councillor Wynne got a second, and I'll come back to you.
Yep, no problem.
Councillor Parsons, please.
I'll second that we accept the recommendations of the officer.
Thank you. Councillor Boddington.
Thank you. I propose that we reject this proposal due to lack of public consultation, despite the committee's request, that because of the impact on the local historic environment, particularly Greek Church, and find my notes, I need to put my glasses on, particularly Greek Church, and I don't think members visited Greek Church at the last meeting. The impact on rights of way, and I can name those for officers that, but I won't do it immediately because we might as well have the vote. But it has a major impact on rights of way. And the loss of valuable agricultural land. Not best and most versatile, but valuable.
And that's your amended proposal.
Yeah.
Have you a second for that, councillor Evans?
Thank you, Chairman.
Proposal.
Yes, I will second that. Farmers farm with most income in mind. So I think it is important that we actually do consider the impact of it. But I'll second that amendment.
Thank you. Okay. Right, we've got a recommendation for accepting the officer's recommendation, proposed by councillor Paul Wynne, seconded by councillor Bernie Parsons. Could I ask him to take the vote, please, on that?
Okay, the proposal to accept the officer's recommendation, if you could indicate whether you're voting for, against or abstaining, please. Caroline Bagnall?
For.
Andy Boddington?
Against.
Roger Evans?
Against.
Nick Hignett?
For.
Kelly Wheeler?
For.
Nigel Lumby?
For.
Richard Marshall? Tony Parsons?
For.
Mark Williams?
For.
Paul Wynne?
For.
And David Evans?
For the Ed Potter as well.
Sorry, she took it updated. Ed Potter?
For.
Okay, so we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So that's 9 to accept the officer's recommendation and 2 against.
Okay, so carries the officer's recommendation is approved. Thank you.
Chairman, excuse me, but there was an amendment put. I don't know the procedures for the committee. You don't put the amendment then and then fall back to the motion.
It was a separate proposal. You actually had a proposal put forward to amend. It wasn't amended in proposal, so I think it was a different proposal.
We now go to item 6, please. Holiday deck cabin at Ashdale, Ponsbury Hill.
None of you want to vote in favour.
Item number 6, please. Item number 6.
I noted.
Okay, for that.
Right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This application is made in full and proposes erection of a holiday let cabin and installation of a packaged treatment plant and includes a change of use of land
at Ashdale, Pontry Hill, Shrewsbury. There are no updates on the update sheet. However, I'd like to add the condition number 5 as attached to the approval notice. Sorry, attached to the decision to the officer's report needs to include prior to first use of the site at the start of the condition, which reads in relationship to trees. And the other update I wanted to point out, officers consider there are no impacts on the historic assets as a result of this proposal. I understand members are aware of the site, having visited the site this morning. The site is located down a private track near to the applicant's dwelling, known as Dingle Bungalow, and within this dwelling's curtilage is a converted garage into a holiday let known as Dingle Retreat. This holiday unit was as a result of an application for change of use to a holiday let as a result of an earlier lawful development certificate application to convert the garage, which was already in unauthorised use, as ancillary residential accommodation. I felt that was important to inform you as background information as to why there's already holiday accommodation nearby. Members' attention is drawn to the site's planning history as outlined in section 10 of the report, and that's titled Relevant Planning History. The current proposal is for a log cabin consisting of 1 bedroom, measuring 8.5 metres by 5.5 metres, with a ridge height of approximately 3 metres, as set out in paragraphs 6.38 and 6.39 of the officer's report. I'll now run through the slides. The first one is the site location plan, outlined in red. Next slide, please. That's the proposed site plan, indicating the site and the layout of the proposal. Next slide, please. This is proposed plans and elevations. It's a timber chalet with a canopy, a veranda on front of it, and then the internal layout it shows indicates the living accommodation and the 1 bedroom. Next slide, please.
Okay, the last one.
Is there no photographs?
No, that's all I've got.
Okay, well, as members visited the site this morning, that's not so relevant. Drainage issues have been raised as a concern by the parish council. It is noted that the council's drainage team are satisfied that there are no concerns on this matter. This matter is further discussed in section 6.6 and 6.7 of the officer's report, and officers are satisfied that there are no drainage issues of concern in relationship to this application. Also, it is noted no other consultees raised any objections in relation to the proposal. It is acknowledged the local parish council do object to the proposal as set out in paragraph 4.2 of the officer's report. In conclusion, on balance, this application is considered acceptable with no adverse impacts on the surrounding landscape, with no adverse impacts on public highway issues and drainage. The recommendation is one of approval subject to conditions as outlined in Appendix 1 attached to the report. It is also recommended that an additional condition is attached to ensure that adequate control of the site with regards occupation ownership. And the suggested condition reads as follows. The residents of the existing nearby dwelling, known as Dingle Bungalow, shall provide the requisite supervision and management of the holiday accommodation enterprise hereby approved. As such, the two shall not at any time be disposed of separately. And the reason for this recommended condition, to ensure the provision of adequate on-site supervision of the enterprise in the interests of sustainable tourism development and the protection of residential amenity. I've suggested that condition because, strictly speaking, this is not part of a existing rural business diversification project, such as farm diversification, which our planning policies support. Thank you, Mr. Chair. That concludes my presentation on this application.
Thank you very much. We've got no member of the parish council here to speak, so I move on to the local member, which is Nick Ignat. Councillor Ignat, please. And you have 5 minutes to address the committee.
Thank you, Chair.
when I was just a young lad, many years ago, my father said to me, "Put your shoes on, we're going up Ponsby Hill Road." I asked why, and he replied that the pub on the hill was closing today, and he wanted me to be able to boast that I was one of the last people to have a drink in that pub. And I did, I had a Coke and a packet of crisps. The moral of this story is that Ponsby Hill residents were virtually self-contained. They had their own shop, they had a pub, they had 3 chapels, and plenty of other vibrant businesses. These days, the Hill Road is part of the rapidly expanding village of Ponsby, with all of the amenities and services that are available in that village. It is certainly not in an isolated rural location. It is definitely part of the village. And I wanted to make this point because it explains why holiday lets are very much in demand in this location and why applications such as this one are being presented. Ponsby Parish Council, which I sit on, objected to this application for 2 main reasons based on the information they had at the time of their meeting. The issues were the culverted watercourse, which they believed to be within 6 metres of the proposed cabin, and the risk of flooding during heavy rainfall, which was according to local knowledge. Now, both of these issues have been addressed, as detailed in the officer's report 6.7.2 to 6.7.6. And therefore, Ponsby Parish Planning Committee Chair has decided not to speak at this meeting. This proposal is for a 1-bedroom, very small holiday-let cabin of appropriate scale and character for the location. There are multiple cycle routes and walks in the area. Indeed, some are actually on the doorstep, meaning that the vehicles of holidaymakers could quite possibly see little use during their time in the cabin. In fact, I know of several residents on the hill that don't own a car and don't want one. The officer's report deals comprehensively with NPPF and policy guidelines and concludes that, on balance, the application can be supported. I therefore ask members to support this application, along with the conditions detailed in 7.2. Thank you, Chair and Committee.
Thank you. And you got Simon White, the agent, please. Simon White. Agent for the applicant. Okay. Right, Councillor Parsons, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it was interesting to look around this site this early afternoon, and I'm supportive of this application, but I do think there are some issues which you don't actually see from the plan, but you absolutely do if you're there, and that is that to the left of where the development will be, there is it's in a dingle. It's very high ground at the back of that, with some trees growing on rocky land, and also there is the possibility that something may need to be done in terms of the conditions, if they're not already in 7.2. There's a couple of beech trees there that look like they could easily, in poor weather, crash down onto whatever's built below it. There is an issue there, but it's not an issue that will necessarily stop the development. But I think something needs to be looked at as far as that's concerned.
Okay, Councillor Lott, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I agree with Councillor Pearson there that the back is a very high cliff, and it does need some kind of protection putting, especially with the trees up high. I don't know whether the officers can put a condition in on that safety, but otherwise I'm in support of the application.
I'm looking to the conditions now. There are a number of conditions attached, recommended here, and I'm just checking to see could one be tweaked to take into consideration what you suggested. Is that you're mindful to? I think it could be if you were mindful to approve, it would be subject to amend the conditions to take into consideration that. And I'd also like members to consider whether the condition I suggested is appropriate or not.
No, I think that sounds fine. If it can be dealt with in that way, I'm happy with that. Yeah.
Okay. Any other speakers, please? Anybody want to propose or refuse? Or?
Chair,
Councillor Wynne.
Can I just ask a question? The local members in favour of it, the officer in favour of it. Why is it committee? I don't.
Mr. Parish Council again.
Parish council and that's it?
Yeah.
Okay, fine.
Okay. I'm willing to make a proposal from the chair. We accept the officer's recommendation with the conditions mentioned, with the trees and the other conditions on condition 5. I'm willing to propose it from the chair. We accept the recommendation with the conditions put into place. Councillor Evans.
Seconded.
Thank you. Would you like to take the vote, Kim, please?
Proposed and seconded to accept the officer recommendation, the amendments to condition 5 and with the condition in relation to the trees.
Yep.
If you could indicate with your voting for, against or abstaining, please. Caroline Bagnall.
For.
Andy Boddington.
For.
Roger Evans.
For.
Hilary Luff. For. Nigel Lumby.
For.
Ed Potter.
For.
Tony Parsons.
For.
Mark Williams.
For.
Paul Wynne.
For.
And David Evans.
For.
Okay, that's unanimous.
Thank you very much, Timothy. Right, goes with item number 7, which is running northwest of Pleasant View, Rowley.
Get the right check back in.
Okay. All right.
Right, Mr. Chair. Right, this application is made in outline with all matters other than access reserved for future consideration and proposes the erection of a pair of 2-bedroom affordable houses with associated access and parking facilities on land northwest of Pleasant View, Rowley, which is to the west of Oswestry. I understand members visited the site this morning.
Yeah.
Right. There are updates on this application as set out on the update sheet. This includes a response from the council's landscape consultant, who has responded to the application raising concerns. And I must bring that to members' attention in relation to the landscape and visual impact assessment submitted in support of the application. And there is also, please note, the further responses from the applicant with regards to Shropshire Council highways and tree issues. Which, however, officers are not convinced by the further information submitted by the applicants, and this does remain a concern. There's also a letter of support from an additional member of the public. We have also received a further communication via email from the applicant's agent, which indicates disappointment at the officer's recommendation and summaries as opinion in the report. And in particular, in relation to the landscape consultant's response, officers share the council's landscape officer's views as set out in his response, as well as having concerns with regards roadside vegetation and the requirements for road improvements, and thus impacts on the hedge and tree alongside the site, and thus insufficient information has been submitted in support of this application on these matters. This also ties in with the concerns as set out by the landscape consultant in his response, which is set out in detail on your update sheet. The letter also raises concerns that the report refers little to the pros and cons of affordable housing provision in rural areas. This matter I will discuss further later. Rowley, in accordance with policy S2 of the SAMDEV, forms part of a community cluster where development by infilling and conversions may be considered acceptable on suitable sites. As this application is for affordable housing, sites adjacent to or adjoining the relevant settlement are considered acceptable in accordance with policy CS11. Members are reminded this application is not for single plot rural exception site, as pointed out by the parish council. It is for affordable housing in line with the council's general affordable housing policy. As such, whether the settlement concerned is a scattered, loose-knit settlement is not an issue. The fact is, the site is located in a remote location from other housing, none within sight of the application site, along a narrow country lane with no services provided. It represents, in officers' opinion, unsustainable development. Policy CS5 in the local plan is clear in that applications for local needs housing in rural settlements will be required to demonstrate the need and benefit for the development proposed. Development will be expected to take place primarily in recognised named settlements or be linked to other existing development and business activity where this is appropriate. Well, so this is a local need in relation to the cluster of the site forms part of. This particular site is isolated from local services and unsustainable. The application is not made in full, but outlined, with no specific housing need demonstrated as to the future occupants of the said two dwellings. The type and affordability of housing supplementary planning document in Appendix G discounted rent states that the council recognises that private landlords, landed estates, communities and land trusts, development comprises and registered providers may seek to provide rented affordable housing in Shropshire independently of the grant-funded Homes and Community Agency Affordable Housing Programme. Such rented houses can be delivered as part of a planning obligation and secured as affordable housing in perpetuity. The Housing Register, as of September the 9th, identified 9 households with a local connection in the Worthing and Shelve parish who were seeking homes. The need is identified as for 1 2-bedroom accommodation. The homes will be subject to a Section 106 agreement to control allocation, local connection and advertising through Shropshire Home Point and affordable rents. That's part of the officers' knowledge. However, officers remain of the opinion that this site is not suitable for such development, being as it is isolated in nature. I'll now run through the sides. The first one on the before you is the site location plan with the application site outlined in red, and obviously outlined below the applicant's land. The site, next slide please. That's as close to of the site. It's located along a stone track that leads down to 3 chalets, a dwelling, and the stables with the dwelling. I actually visited the site myself at the weekend actually, because I wasn't clear as to where the site was and its location with being for affordable housing. Next slide, please. That's an indicative plan of the proposed layout with access off the lane leading down. Members will have noted the oak tree that's on the entrance to the site and the hedging and what the council's highways have said in relationship to road improvements. Next slide, please. That's an indicative plan of the proposed housing, and I note the applicants have also put in an indicative plan of how they could be extended. These plans are not part of the consideration of this application. As members will be aware, it's in outline only with access. Next slide, please. That shows site sections, and again illustrative only because siting is not included as part of the outline. Next slide, please. That's showing the houses and how they could possible extensions. I don't know what the aim is, but it's supposed to be for affordable housing. However, that plan again is illustrative only and bears no weight in the determination of the application before you. Next slide, please. Topographical survey, that is. And now the photographs, please. Right. There's the photograph of the lane leading along the site, which members have been along this morning, and that's looking into the site with the oak tree on the corner and the hedge. What the highways concerned is intensification of that access would need road improvements and visibility, and what officers' concerns are is that insufficient information has been submitted with the application, because access is included as part of this outline with regards loss of hedgerow and impacts on that tree, which is right on the junction from where access is proposed. My camera's repeating itself there. I think those all look very similar. Can we go to the next one, please? Isn't there 2 lots of photographs?
Yeah, hang on. Apologies. Give me a second, sorry.
Sorry, thank you. Right, that's the first photograph is a better photograph of the oak tree adjacent to the entrance to the site. Members will be aware this morning that leads down to the stables and the chalet, and it's off that access into the site is proposed. The second photograph is showing how close to the verge the hedges are, and equally with the latter 2, which is showing the back of the site and the surrounding area in which there are no houses in sight of this particular site and its location, which is what I would describe as situated on the side of the early starts of Long Mountain, looking down towards the road from Westbury towards Worthing. In conclusion, based on the statutory consultee responses to this application, there are significant officer concerns with regards to the principle of the development, with consideration to the location, which is considered isolated and divorced from the hamlet the site is associated with. Further still, as indicated by the council's landscape officer, the landscape and visual impact assessment findings cannot be relied upon. Further still, Shropshire Council Highways, in their response, have raised concerns with regards to the public highway access to the site and the need for highway improvements. And thus, impacts on adjacent roadside hedgerows are unknown. It is noted the application is made in outline only, with all matters other than access reserved for future consideration. In conclusion, the recommendation is one of refusal for the following reasons. It is considered that the location of the development would result in a detached and prominent development that would extend built development beyond what can be regarded as the limits of this part of Rowley, and into an area which is more akin to the countryside in character and appearance. This would cause unacceptable harm to the character and appearance of this part of Rowley and the adjacent countryside, in contravention of policy CS5, CS6 and CS17 of the adopted core strategy, along with policies MD2 and MD12 of the SAMDEV. And also, that's the condition as set out in the report. I'd also like to add a second reason for refusal, and this reads, in relation to the principle of development, insufficient information has been submitted in support of the application in order to make a positive recommendation, as pointed out by the council's landscape consultant. The landscape and visual impact assessment is not prepared in accordance with best practice as set out in GLB IA3 and does not set out a structured and evidence-based assessment of landscape and visual effects. Further still, the Shropshire Council Highways Manager has raised concerns in regards to requirements for highways improvements, and it is not known what impacts these will have on adjacent hedgerows and vegetation. I must make clear that highways officer himself on highways access only does not object. Its concerns about the details submitted with regards vegetation. Insufficient housing need has also been demonstrated in relation to the need for affordable housing in this isolated rural location, not considered sustainable or adjacent to a recognised named settlement in relation to the provision of affordable housing. That's the reason, the second reason for refusal as recommended by officers. And I'd just like to add, it would be advised that any application for such development needs to be made in full, so that the impacts can be fully assessed in relation to the location, setting of the site concerned, and issues in relation to future occupation of the dwellings concerned. As I want to make it clear, officers fully support affordable housing in appropriate locations. And as I pointed out, this is not an application for rural exception, but for affordable housing in line with the Council's general policy on such housing. Thank you, Mr. Chair. That concludes my report on this presentation.
Thank you very much. Thank you. We've got 3 speakers on this. We've got Heather Davis. Sorry? Oh, sorry, you're the local resident personally. Didn't see that there. Mrs. Faraday. Lee Faraday. Sorry. Lee Faraday, you have 3 minutes to address the committee, sir, please.
Good afternoon. I was one of 14 online supporters for the application, and I think it's worth noting that there weren't any other objections at that point. I believe there is a significant need for affordable housing in the location where these houses will be built. Most houses built in this area are 3 or 4 bedrooms. Consequently, they are unaffordable for local people seeking a place to buy or rent. This can too often lead to people having to move away from the area and from their friends, family or community to find a place to live. I believe this application could meet the demand in the local community, as it is apparent that few, if any, affordable houses are being built around this location. I strongly supported this application because it means that we would have a member of the local community building housing, affordable housing, for other members of the local community. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Any questions, please, Mr. Farrell? Thank you very much, sir. Now call on Heather Davis on behalf of Worthing and Shelf Parish Council, Parish Meeting. You have 3 minutes to address the committee. Thank you.
Can you hear me? I would like to speak on behalf of Worthing with Shelf Parish Council in support of Mr. Williams' planning application. As the Parish Council understands, this application is for 2 small, affordable properties within our parish. They will be rented properties, semi-detached, and will provide housing for the people in the local area. Mr. Williams has gone through all the correct procedures with this application, and there aren't any objections from local people. In fact, the comments of support share the Parish Council's views that these are very much needed within our parish. These properties are in line with our parish plan, and they give families and individuals a chance to stay in the area in which they live and have likely lived all their lives. Without this type of housing, people are often forced out of the area, putting our rural community at a great disadvantage. Firstly, we lose our services, such as schools and shops, and we have lost a considerable amount in our parish already. And secondly, our local economy suffers, as we lose people who work in local industries, such as agriculture and tourism. If we keep losing people who understand our rural community and how it works, our parish will become like a ghost town. It will be non-existent. Also, we have a higher than average older population. These people often rely on younger families and individuals for support and to help them meet their needs. Our social care is sadly often very limited within our area because of its remoteness. People are often so very dependent on one another. Finally, to build 2 properties of this type would fit in well in our local area rather than a larger estate of similar housing. It would be more in keeping with our small villages and hamlets, of which our parish is made up of. I have been a councillor now for almost 10 years, and sadly I have not seen anywhere near enough properties built of this kind in our community. There have been talk of it, but nothing sadly followed through. There have been plenty of much larger executive properties built, but this type of housing simply outprices the majority of local people and they are forced to move away. We need balance in our community when it comes to local housing. We need to provide for local need. This type of property is necessary for people who wish to stay and live in the area because of work and because that's where they want to raise their children. We as parish councillors know, we speak to people all the time, and we are the ones that understand what local need is in our area. To conclude, on the grounds that these properties provide affordable housing for local people and remain as such, we as a parish council would like to support this application. We feel they will benefit our rural community and they will be a step in the right direction for our parish to continue to thrive. Thank you for listening.
Any questions? No, thank you very much.
Thank you.
On the local member, Heather Kidd, please. Councillor Heather Kidd. Your 5 minutes to address the committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Probably is all. I would like to absolutely support everything Heather has just said. And as Ed knows, planning up in Rowley has been interesting over the years. I would like to point out to planners in this room that in fact there are 7 properties that have already been given permission in this settlement. 1 just over the border in Westbury parish, but actually part of the Rowley settlement, and the other 6 actually in this settlement. So for an unsustainable development, I am shocked that this one development of housing that would actually provide for our residents in a way that we haven't seen anything deliver for our residents is now thought to be unsustainable for ordinary people. Apparently, if you own land, you can build something as big as you want up there, but actually if you are less able to live in the area because you cannot afford the rents anymore, then actually it's not sustainable. We know that Long Mountain School in Worthing is struggling with numbers. It was meant to have 140 children on roll. It now has less than 100. This is because we do not build the right sort of housing. In the last 10 years, we have had 2 sets of semis built in Worthing, and that is all. Hope School closed and is now at Long Mountain. Everything else that has been built has been executive housing with 4 and 5 bedrooms and some with gyms downstairs. This is an opportunity with the right conditions put on it to make sure that we have small housing. I do not want to see 2 semis ever be converted into an executive home, which could happen, but the right conditions would make sure that that doesn't happen. Those 2 semis that were built, 2 sets of semis that were built in Worthing, have provided families for the school. It's time that actually our policies reflect what we need. And if planners looked at Right Home, Right Place, which was a whole system set out and conducted by both the parish and by this council, you would find that it isn't just 9 people needing housing on the waiting list, because most people don't get on our waiting lists. Houses are so rarely available for people to rent. So what I would want you to do is look at this. If there are details that need to be corrected or more detail put in place, then make sure those happen. But the principle of building 2-bedroom semis in a rural location where people need to live because they work there, despite the fact that most people think that, no, we can't live and work in the countryside anymore. We do have broadband, we do have farms, we do have care, we do have schools and a number of public sector jobs that require people to live in the countryside, and our settlements require that building, but it has to be the right sort of building. And we are not providing that as a council. I would also like to add that this was a dispersed settlement before the planners decided that actually we could only ever provide housing in this settlement by creating a nucleated settlement. So most of the planning permissions that have been put in place have created a nucleated settlement of Rowley that never existed in the past. It is a dispersed settlement, and this one is not on the end of the settlement, there's Rowley Farm further on, there are other cottages further on, and there is another house that has permission further on that has yet to be built, but the bricks and so on are on site. So, please, on this occasion, understand that rural sustainability is not what many people think it is, that actually it's a desert where only the wealthy can live, that actually we need to build for those people who want to stay with their communities. But we do need to put the right conditions in place to make sure that happens. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Any questions for other people? No? Thank you very much. Right, we go on Clay Roberts, the agent, please. You have 3 minutes to address the committee, so thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This is a somewhat unusual application. The applicant is a local private individual who proposes to construct 2 affordable homes, but neither he nor any part of his family would occupy the properties. It's proposed that the houses will be available to rent to local people who are in need of affordable housing and maybe at some time in the future sold to them. Council's Affordable Housing Enabling Officer has confirmed as part of this application that wasn't read out in full that there is a need for such housing in the locality and that this proposal meets the council's criteria for being regarded as affordable housing. The dwellings would be subject to restrictions on rent and sale of affordable housing as set out in the council's supplementary planning documents. There is a significant need for such accommodation in the locality. This was evident to the parish council when they prepared their parish plan, as it became clear that the provision of affordable housing for local people was a top priority for most of the residents surveyed during the preparation of that plan. Since the current local plan has been in operation, only 3 affordable houses have been approved in the community cluster, which includes the village of Rowley. However, nearly 30 open market dwellings have been approved in that cluster. Many of those have been individual, quite large houses, with a number making no financial contribution towards the provision of affordable housing. The need for more affordable housing in the community remains significant. The reason for refusal set out at Appendix 1 of the officer's report says that the proposed development will cause unacceptable harm to the character and appearance of this part of Rowley and the countryside. That has been added to at this meeting. We knew nothing about these additional reasons that were going to be suggested, and the issue of whether this was sustainable or not was the first time we'd heard this. And I must say it was quite a remarkable summary of the application. I've only got 3 minutes, so I can't start on it, I'm afraid. The applicant simply disagrees with the unevidenced assessment of the effect on the countryside, as did, in fact, his landscape consultant. He believes that the type of houses proposed and the manner in which they will sit into the landscape is entirely consistent with the character of Rowley, the area generally, and their landscape setting. This is what happens in Rowley. It will be difficult to see the proposed dwellings from any public viewpoint, and if they are seen, they will appear to be entirely appropriate to their setting. I'll stop there, sir.
Thank you. Any questions, please? Yeah, go to Barton.
Yes, I'd like to ask a question. One of the issues that's been raised is that perhaps the planning team don't have all of the information that they may require to change their recommendation as far as this application is concerned. I just wondered, because when we were on site this morning, we looked around, and just if you could confirm to me that where we see the entrance gate at the moment, that won't actually be the entrance to the site.
No, that is a gate which goes off the existing access to Pleasant View, and that gate will clearly not be the access to these dwellings. It's shown further down the track. And then quite obviously, if that was left open, that would be straight into the back gardens of these people. And that wasn't the idea at all. The idea was that the hedge would be continued around that corner. There is, incidentally, the tree's been mentioned, and that is to remain. And you'll see from the block plan that the access to the houses, which is further on down the track to Pleasant View, skirts well clear of the root protection zone for that tree.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
That's fine, thank you.
You would come back in, please. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Councillor Heather Kidd and her comments. Yeah, share a lot of what she says. Obviously, concerns are that this is an outline application. A lot of it is speculative. The description of the development is 2 affordable housing. It doesn't indicate 2 semi-detached dwellings. It's for 2 affordable dwellings. It's made in outline, and there's a lot of issues of concern and doubt owing to the fact that it is an outline application rather than a full. Rowley is part of a community cluster of several other settlements within the surrounding locality, and I would class Rowley as a hamlet and one of the smaller ones. The agent's comments now about access, yes, I share his view. It is off the stone track leading down just below. However, the tree is of concern with regard to visibility and the hedgerow with improvements. There's no site layout. There's no indication of what vegetation needs to be removed in order to achieve the required visibility. Highways have accepted it can be achieved. However, at what cost to vegetation, we're not aware of. And then you'll have got the landscape consultant's response in front of you. That actually came in on the day it was published. The agent has responded to it, but unfortunately officers cannot share the views as put forward, and therefore officers have to agree with our specialist landscape consultant with his comments he's made in relationship to the applicant's LVIA. And that concludes what I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Parsons, please.
Yeah, I'm supportive of this application, having viewed it this morning. I believe that the hedgerow to the north on that plan there is sufficiently high to cause very little view of the property. And if that gateway that we saw as the current entrance to the field is hedged, and the entrance to the houses is further down that lane, then in my view it will be hidden. It will not be seen by people passing in the area. It's affordable housing. I think in my view, it is close enough to the other residences in the village that we passed both on our way in and back out from this site. And we know that in the south of Shropshire, affordable housing is like gold dust. So I will be supporting this application.
Councillor, please.
Thank you, Chair. I too will be supporting this application. We had discussions about the access, and when we were at the site meeting today, and it was definitely going to come down over the cattle grid and into the field. I did walk down the lane to see about looking through the hedge and seeing the houses, and you may get the odd glimpse, but it certainly wouldn't be something that would be shouting out at you that there's 2 properties there. So yes, I will support this application.
Councillor Potter, please.
Thank you very much. As Councillor Kidd has alluded to, I know this area particularly well. My boundary division is just a few hundred metres up the road, and I think actually the boundary between us runs through one of the properties to the northeast of the settlement. So I'm not really sure whose that resident is, but I have residents that I have my residents who consider themselves part of the dispersed settlement of Rowley, And I think within the siting and the location of this, I think it is in fitting with a dispersed settlement. And I echo, I don't often agree with Councillor Kidd on a lot of things, but when it comes to things around Rowley and planning up there and the need for affordable homes, we're certainly on the same page with things like this, because there is a significant need in this area on the Long Mountain for affordable homes for young people, young families. I echo the comments around Long Mountain School. There is very little affordable housing in the rest of my parish of Westbury available. It is open countryside. And I think there is an issue with the policy more generally around that for rural areas to provide this provision. I also hear what officers are saying around around making sure that this stays affordable in perpetuity, and what mechanisms I would like to know, some reassurances, what mechanisms can we put in place, whether it's through Section 106s or whatever it might be, to ensure that an application for 2 affordable dwellings at a later date does not, because I've seen that happen, become one monster of a dwelling. I know there can be guarantees from applicants, but what can we do is there any information that officers perhaps would be able to give me that we could do to ensure that any future full application that comes forward would ensure that they are 2 affordable dwellings? I'm minded to support this. I hear your concerns around it's a divergence from policy, but sometimes the policy isn't quite right, and it's certainly not right for this part of Shropshire, which I know particularly well.
Thank you. Councillor Evans, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I join with all my colleagues. I am supportive of the arguments that I've heard, supportive of it. We need, as was referred to, balanced communities and also mixed communities. I note that the SAMDEV is at 30 additional dwellings and it's only at 25, so it still complies with the SAMDEV on that. And it is affordable housing. We are in desperate need for them. And I just think that our policies need to be adjusted so that these can be accommodated and stay within policy. But this is the sort of application. I prefer full applications because of what Councillor Potter referred to, but I'm sure that we can tie this up so that when the full application is made, it stays what the intention is behind this application. So, yes, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Gibb, please.
Thank you, Chair. Today we're only dealing with the principle of whether we think this site could be developed and the houses built. I think all the other matters, as Councillor Evans says, can be addressed when the full application comes in. But if they are 2-bedroom houses, there must be a condition that they must be for local residents, and that has been stated quite a few times. I think the scenery up there is so idyllic, as we saw today on the site visit. It's going to be difficult to find a perfect site to build affordable dwellings. But I did note on the site visit the larger executive style homes that are in that area, and certainly if large executive homes like that can be built, then it's probably time that we started to level up and had some affordable dwellings built. So I agree with all the previous speakers, and I think I see which way this meeting is going. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Bagnall, please.
Yeah, thank you. The points I was going to make have been made by the previous 3 speakers. So simply, I was looking for reassurance that we could make some sort of condition that those properties would remain as affordable housing in perpetuity.
Thank you. Philip, would you come back to the place?
Yes, thank you. Yes, it would be standard Section 106, but please be aware they don't set in stone that it remains 100 square metres. We're getting a number of applications now to extend affordable dwellings. We've lost 1 or 2 on appeal, and that is the way this council is going. So after 5 years, they can demonstrate a need to extend the house, which I have no objection to. However, we're getting a number of appeals, and we are defending to the best of our ability, but don't think a Section 106 is foolproof to keep these in affordable in perpetuity. I would much prefer myself if it had been a full application, so that you have everything in front of you on which to make an informed decision. Today it's outlined, and therefore, as Councillor Hignett alongside me has just said, it's the principle only. It doesn't, like there's plans being on screen there indicating 2 quaint semi-detached little cottages, but that the application is for two affordable dwellings on this site. Therefore, it's only access that's been decided of the matters today. Scale and the rest remains to be seen. And like I said, the section 106, although it ties, we do complete them. We are having applications in to make extend dwellings larger, some of which we have supported and approved, depending on the merits of the applications put before us.
Thank you, Chair. Just from my benefits of the site meeting this morning, wanted to clarify that the indicative semis that we saw there, there were two sets of elevations, one related to the basic concept of a 70 square metre individual semis, and the second plans that we saw related to the possibility of an extension to 100 square metres. There wasn't any indication in the indicative plans of any extension beyond that. I think when members went to the site, they could see that we were on a kind of little declivity within a sloping area. I think that the limited area available to accommodate the front garden, the driving down, and the plots being set back away from the hedgerow within that indicates rather that there is a certain self-limiting element here almost, that it may not be very easy from a physical perspective to accommodate any additional extensions other than those that are indicatively indicated. So that's just the point that I wanted to make. Thanks.
Thank you. Can I come back, April? Yeah. So this outline, we're going to sort out the highways issues to get the outline plan application to.
No, if members felt this was acceptable on highways grounds, that's it's okay to go ahead today. The concerns raised is about loss of vegetation. Right. If you feel the vegetation was of no significance, right, and in order to achieve the visibility, remember it isn't access through that gateway. The access, as was pointed out, is slightly down the lane and then turning in. However, because what highway is concerned about is the increased intensification of traffic using that junction, and therefore the need to improve visibility and also, I believe, creation of a lay-by or somewhere for passing vehicles.
Okay. Right, thank you. Paul Wynn, Kendrick.
Thank you, Chair. Just to clarify, the 106 agreement, is it like a farm works dwelling or a local lead dwelling? If it's ever sold, at 60% of the value, so it keeps affordable. Is that right?
I believe they put in for two affordable dwellings in line with the standard policy. This is not a rural exception site. They have not put in for a rural exception. They have put in for affordable housing, just like, for example, if you're building 30 houses down in Westbury and is it 50? Well,
don't give people ideas.
All right, I shall rephrase that. In another settlement, they were building, say, 30 dwellings. We'd have to provide 15% of them affordable. It's dwellings like that.
So it's open market.
It's for anybody in the locality to live in. To be fair, you are the chair of the North Committee, and I haven't come across an application like this in the North.
Well, no, that's what I'm asking the question.
But what I need to be clear today, it's not a rural exception site like we've got one coming up later, and we agree with you, which is a rural exception site. This is for affordable housing. There's no one being. This application hasn't. A rural exception site says who's going to live in that property. It has to meet the tests with housing that they qualify. This one hasn't got it. We don't know who's going to live in them.
So possibly the wrong application comes before.
No. The only thing we could put in the section 106 that whoever lives in them is from the locality, just like affordable housing in the settlement which I was referring to earlier.
Well, I was on the site visit, but it looked a very desirable place to live, I would have thought.
It's got very commanding views, doesn't it, from the site? I cannot share some of the members' views here in that it's tucked away, because it isn't tucked away. It's very open when you look at it from the front. It's got commanding views over the surrounding countryside.
That's what makes me concerned. It won't be affordable in the future. That's just a point of view.
Yeah, so I just wanted to just sort of drill down onto this affordable element. So what is in place now to ensure that it will continue to be affordable. That's, I think, it's the one at section 106, yeah?
It would be a standard.
And then if it was extended, a standard 106. So if it was sold, it would be sold for
open market.
The section 106 would restrict the sale on the open market, so it would keep it affordable.
Yeah.
But as Philip said, that we have been challenged on some where they've gone to appeal and they've either had the section 106.
Well, that's a risk. That's a risk we take, isn't it?
But it depends on what tenure that the affordable dwellings would be. So they might be discounted sale. I'm not sure.
So if it was extended and accepted to a bigger property, but it would still remain affordable if they didn't remove the section 106, because I don't have a problem with that. You know, because actually there's bigger families out there that need affordable dwellings as well. You know, and I've seen that in my division, and it's worked really well. So as long as there's if it's sold or it's in the future, it still is at a discounted rate one way or another. We have to take the risk that a section 106 might be challenged and removed, but that could happen on any property, surely. Any section 106, you know, it happens all the time.
Like you do section 106 is for rural exception, and for the standard, this is standard, it's not a rural exception, so remember.
Yes, it would be protected by the tenures that we normally put forward for our, I'm not sure what's going to be proposed for these ones. Is it discount rented, is it? So we've got, I've got the wording here.
Rent then possibly sold, is that?
Discounted rent. So yeah, it would be subject to our normal conditions for a discounted rent property. So it would, even if the property was extended, normally the extensions aren't taken into the valuation. So that as long as the section 106 was still against that property, it would always be kept affordable.
Yeah. The rural exception policy allows for extensions, doesn't it? And it's not discounted. I'm not sure about the standard one.
This one.
This is the standard one. Like that's why I try to emphasise and about the settlement I referred to. If you're building two houses there. Like the principle, don't get me wrong, Oxford is not against the principle here. We fully support it. We understand where you're all coming from. Our concern is the location, and which I've dwelled on enough, and lack of information in support of the application. And my advice to an agent, if you come to me for pre-application advice, which didn't occur in this instance, would be to put the application in full, so that you've got everything in front of you today, so you can see what you're dealing with.
I'm just trying to look for the discounted rent terms, so I don't say something.
Should say
Do you know that the tenure is going to be discounted?
The property agent would like to inform, but I'm not aware of any information in this part.
Yes. I can answer whatever you'd like. Sorry, I'm making a question as I go along with the answering. The idea was that the properties would be available for rent. All this was explained in a very, very long supporting statement, by the way. And we set out the conditions that we would be looking to be imposed on the occupation of these properties. For instance, there's been the business about two semis being joined into one, and we'd suggested that that could be covered in a Section 106 agreement to ensure that that didn't happen. So the properties would always remain small. We dealt with the issue of small properties, and that certainly the parish council, I think the county council as well, don't want or don't feel that properties which are above 100 square metres are appropriate for affordable housing. So what we did was we designed 2-bed properties, which were 70 cubic metres, 70 square metres, sorry, not cubic, God, I did 70 square metre floor space. And the reason that we put the extra information in about the possible extension was to show that people could, people get married, have an affordable house, they have a child, they may think that another bedroom is appropriate. And rather than force them away into some other town or village, pop a little extension on the back, and that would still remain within 100 square metres. So this was looking to the future. Now, the issue about whether they should be for rent or sold is that it was the intention was that they would be rented. And the rents are set at a discounted price from open market value, around 80%. And that was confirmed in the enabling officer's response to this application. At some point in time, some of these people may want to stay in Rowley in that house permanently. They could either then continue to rent, or they might want to purchase. Now, if they wanted to purchase and the owner wanted to sell it, that purchase price would be discounted at 80%. And then that would be carried on should they resell in the future. What we don't want to see is somebody getting an 80% discount on something, rocking on years' time, selling it for full market value. So all that was proposed, set out in the application and detailed quite extensively in the supporting statement. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, thank you.
I could just say something, Chair.
I'll let you
There's very
what you
much
first.
before, going on what Philip's saying, if it's discounted rent, they're at 80% of the full value of an open market dwelling. I've just checked the wording now in our 106 agreement. And
It's a bit different. I've not seen that. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Members need to be aware today's application is for 2 affordable dwellings on this plot. There's nothing about semi-detached in the description. We could not prevent, based on the description of this development, if they come in reserve matters for 2 detached dwellings, separate dwellings on that site. All I can advise in situations like this is you put in a full application so that if an application has to come to committee, all the facts are there lying in front of you on which basis to make an informed decision. Today, there's a lot of indicative plans and maybe, but they're not. We can't put weight to those conditions because the application is made in outline only, and there's only outline with only highways for consideration today.
If anybody will ask me a question on it, I'll respond to that.
On highway.
Well, on highways and what was said.
Chairman?
Yes, sorry.
I see on the agenda, it says proposed dwelling northwest of Pleasant View, and it says outline application for the erection of a pair of 2-bedroom affordable houses with associated access and parking facilities. That's what we're being asked for. That's what I want to vote on. And I'm proposing that we accept this application on the basis that it is an outline application for the erection of a pair of 2-bedroom affordable houses.
Thank you, Roger.
And I think that needs to be put to bed now.
Yeah. Two proposals, you seconded.
I'd just like to see, I agree with that, but I'd like to see any full application coming back to this committee.
Yeah, agree. Yeah.
Yeah.
I would second that.
You'll second that. Okay, so the proposer, we accept the outline for 2 houses. Seconded by councillor Foster.
We just need to be clear on our reasons. It's contrary to the recommendation.
It's contrary to the Foster's recommendation. Says it on.
I think we can say that we actually believe that it is part of a loose settlement. There's at least 4 houses closely round it. It's not isolated, and that because it's for affordable housing and there is a recognised need, that's why we go against officer's recommendation.
Okay, all right, Roger.
Accepted,
Yeah, okay. So you propose and seconded. We go back, officer's recommendation.
They need to delegate to officers for the conditions in a section 106 agreement.
Yeah, yeah, delegate to officers of 106 agreement, okay?
Well, and conditions.
And conditions, yeah. And that, the full application goes back to the committee. Yeah. Right, we just take the vote, thank you, please.
Okay, if you could indicate whether you are voting for, against or abstaining from the proposal to accept the recommendation for the reasons given and to delegate the conditions to officers and section 106 agreement. Caroline Bagnall.
For.
Andy Waddington.
For.
Roger Evans.
For.
Nick Hignett.
For.
Hilary Luff.
For.
Nigel Lumbey.
For.
Ed Potter.
For.
Tony Parsons,
4.
Mark Williams,
4.
Paul Wynn,
Abstain.
and David Evans.
4.
So it's 10-4, 1 abstention.
Okay, 10-4, 1 abstention. And we'll now take a conference break for 5 minutes, okay? Good.
I know, but you know, that's what you said. That was,
Right. The next item on the agenda was to be Havelock Cottage and Wenlock. However, following further consideration, it has been established that the application does not fully meet the test of a committee referral under the council scheme delegation. Specifically, there was no member call-in request within 21 days. Additionally, the officers refused a recommendation is contrary to the position of the town council, but the latter has not put forward any material reasons in support or contrary to the recommendation. Accordingly, the application is referred back to the officers for determination and the agenda item should be disregarded. That's your next item on the agenda, disregarded now, that was item number 8. So item number 9. Proposed holiday accommodation. Graham.
Thank you, Chair. Next slide, please. So members, some members visited the site this morning off Wenlock Edge, Stretton Westwards, about 4 kilometres to the southwest of Wenlock. So the proposal is for 2 holiday lets. If we can move on to the next slide. Partially dug into the ground, new pond, associated landscaping, habitat creation, electric charging points, e-bike storage, 18.4 kilowatt solar array and a ground source heat pump. So this is a resubmission of an applicant. Can we have the next slide again, please? Thank you. Resubmission of an application which, where am I now? Which was refused. And the previous application was refused because the proposed buildings didn't conform the legal definition of a caravan and were not considered to be in a sustainable location, and insufficient information was submitted to allow the effects on trees to be assessed. So this time round we've had a tree survey done, and our trees people are happy with that, as is the ecologist. We still have permanent leisure to let properties within the open countryside. So that is against our policy MD11, which states that properties that don't conform to the legal definition of a caravan and are not related to conversion of existing or appropriate rural buildings will be resisted in the countryside, following the approach to open market residential developments. In this particular case, you'll see from the plans, and if we can perhaps move on to the cross sections, which are perhaps a bit more illustrative as well, that we're looking at some fairly novel form of tourist to let accommodation, certainly not conforming to the legal definition of a caravan. They're more like sort of hobbit houses. They have very high environmental credentials, though. They're designed to the principle of a passive house, which is a kind of European concept of using natural light and heat and ventilation in order to minimise the requirements for artificial energy to keep the house cool, warm, ventilated as required. So we have 2 of them. One, if you can move back to the previous slide, is on the, can we move back, thank you, to the, more to the centre of that sort of coloured polygon, with the property that we drove to, which is where the applicant lives, on the north east or top right side, as it were. And then as we come a bit further along, we saw that there were was a kind of a lodge structure with 2 existing dwellings, which had been previously approved, and it got its approval. It was an existing building, and I think it got an approval for conversion, and there was a kind of mobility element there. So it was for disabled people, and I think it was able to get its permission as a conversion for an existing building through that mechanism. But that has been proven to be quite successful from the applicant's perspective, and they now want to develop this particular element of their holiday letting business. And so let's say at the centre of the site, we have a two-bedroom semi-subterranean passive house. And on the western side of the site, you'll see a kind of red square. It's not very clear from this plan, so apologies, but there's a larger four-bedroom property, which isn't set quite so much below the ground level, but the proposal is to use excavated spoil from the structure of the two properties to raise the ground level so it melds down sort of progressively to that of the existing level. So the trees issue has been resolved. We have support from Much Wenlock Town Council, who were out there this morning, and they're happy with the environmental credentials of the scheme. There have been no other objections from consultees, including, as I said, ecology and highways and drainage. But we have a policy issue because MD11 tells us that we can't have structures away from market towns and existing settlements with a critical mass of leisure interest and activity. This is certainly not in the middle of Much Wenlock. It's a significant distance, 4 kilometres. And these are clearly permanent dwellings and not caravans. So members are being asked, therefore, to look at another element of the MPPF, which is paragraph 80, which refers primarily to open market residential dwellings. But we're being asked to view this as if these were, because the policy tests are very similar. And the issue is, do these conform to exceptional circumstances under paragraph 80? I think it's 80E of the framework, which basically says it has to be of exceptional architectural quality and of high environmental credentials. And in this case, clearly we have eco houses. The design is quite novel. It's certainly not what you'd see in most leisure developments in Shropshire. Does that compensate for the fact that we're 4 kilometres outside Much Wenlock? That essentially is a choice of members to decide. The officer position is that these structures are permanent dwellings a sufficiently long distance from Much Wenlock that they do not comply with the provisions of MD11. Now, the applicant has come forward with some further extenuating sort of reasons for this. One of the points they're saying is this is exactly the area that people want to be, particularly people with dogs who don't want to be in the middle of Much Wenlock in accordance with the policy. They're saying that we've had 2 years of lockdown in which the staycation concept has grown in a Shropshire position, and that the policies are behind the curve in terms of the market. So really, as I say, it is for you to decide as the committee, but from the officer perspective, interpreting the policies rigidly, this would not meet the criteria for policy MD11. It should be noted that there is a reversion, obviously the emerging Shropshire local plan is coming through. I think it's policy 14 of that, I think, if I'm not much mistaken, but it does appear slightly more liberal in terms of the ability to put higher quality properties of a permanent nature in the open countryside. So I think we're at a situation where perhaps the policies may be catching up, but we're not there yet. So the officer position is that we have to go with the adopted policy, that's MD11, and this is simply too far away from the edge of Much Wenlock. But it's really over to members to look at it in the context that I've just mentioned. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We have 3 speakers on this. We've got David Fenwick. And you're speaking on behalf of Much Wenlock Parish Council. And you have 3 minutes to address the committee, please. Thank you.
Much Wenlock Town Council, Mr.
Town Council, sorry.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak on this as a town councillor for Much Wenlock. We wholeheartedly support this application. I find it rather difficult, having listened to the officer's report on this, because he seems to be saying all the things why this application should be approved. The only one that seems to be a problem is SAMDEV policy MD11. It appears to me that this is a policy that's out of date. I accept that it stands at the moment, but listening to the proceedings this afternoon, it seems to me that this is something that can be somewhat sidestepped and can be put to one side if appropriate. I hope that you would agree when you listen to all the statements from people this afternoon with this. You'll agree with that. The applicants and their agents have gone to great trouble, in my view, to ensure that as far as possible in this application, ecological matters, sustainable rural tourism, which is a big issue for us, and a well-designed buildings are blending well into the countryside, respecting the countryside and taking into account everything regarding their overall design. Rural tourism, as it affects much Wenlock, cannot be overestimated. We are a medieval town. We benefit very much from rural tourism financially. And local businesses, shops and restaurants and public houses all benefit hugely in these very difficult times. Let's be honest about it. In addition, as far as the design is concerned, energy requirements for the site will be catered for by a ground source heat pump system, electric vehicle charging points and solar panels. And as such, it seems to me tick all the boxes for a good, strong, sustainable development. To ensure that the visual impact on the area of outstanding natural beauty in which it stands is minimal, the design of the units is really very interesting. It's very modern in its concept, but at the same time, it is designed in such a way that it has minimal impact on the area and on the countryside, not the least of which is the fact that all the roofs will be green, blending in with the spoil that's going to be laid out in industrial designs all the way around, so that it looks as though these properties have almost been there for a long time. So that's my relatively short statement, and I would urge you to support this application.
Any questions, please? No. Thank you very much, sir.
Thanks.
Now call on Councillor Dan Thomas, local member, please. You have 5 minutes to address the committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Much Wenlock's economy relies heavily on tourism due to its unique history and its connection with the modern Olympic Games. This proposal will add to the tourist accommodation in our local area, benefiting our local economy. I feel that having holiday lets of this quality and style with the eco-credentials benefits our community and the wider Shropshire tourism industry. They allow people to stay together in larger families or groups, and as the Shropshire councillor and former mayor of the town, I believe this would complement the existing accommodation Much Wenlock has, as it mostly comprises currently of smaller studio flats and B&Bs. The design access statement here clearly demonstrates the high standard of building materials and careful consideration has been given to the associated landscaping. The use of such materials ensures that the buildings will sit very comfortably within the local landscape. As you would have heard in the officer's report, the principle of the erection of new build holiday lets is contrary to SAMDEV policy MD11, where this wouldn't be the case if it's a caravan. However, Much Wenlock has a neighbourhood plan which supports this proposal. The neighbourhood plan policy EJ7 seeks to support sustainable rural tourism and leisure developments that benefit businesses in rural areas, communities and visitors, and respect the countryside's character. The parish has many resources to support sustainable tourism, including the historic character of the town, its shops, attractions and facilities, and the opportunities for quiet recreation on Wenlock Edge. This plan encourages and supports appropriate leisure and tourism activities and meets the green tourism aspects of the neighbourhood plan. The sustainable nature of this proposal and its location meet with the neighbourhood plan aspirations. And finally, it's important to note that by 2030, petrol and diesel cars will no longer be manufactured. Much Wenlock currently only has one public electrical vehicle charging point, and while this proposal won't provide another public one, it will provide a nice place to stay for people with electric cars, which is greatly needed in Much Wenlock. Committee members, as you know all too well, determination of planning applications rests on the balance of material planning considerations. We have here an application that is supported locally by both the Town Council and me as the local member, and there are no other representations from members of the public. This application is supported with the Much Wenlock neighbourhood plan. I would urge you to apply greater weight to the local aspirations for tourism than the broad brush Shropshire-wide Sandev policy. And in this instance, please approve this application. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions, please? Thank you for that. Therefore, Dave Richards, please, the agent. And you have 3 minutes to address the committee. Thank you.
Right, thank you members for the opportunity to speak. I have got a preset thing that I was going to say, but first of all, I'm going to have to respond to the planning officer's comments. He made reference to not permanent dwellings. Well, these aren't dwellings, these are holiday units, so we must get away from that. He also made reference to them not being eco houses. Well, no, they're not eco houses, they're holiday units. And then he also added that the existing structure that is there was a conversion, whereas it wasn't. It was an approval under 18/00857 for the erection of 2 holiday lodges, part retrospective. So you've established that new build could take place at that site. A lot of the things that have been said by other people, I don't intend to repeat. But the simple fact is that the reason for refusal, if you break it down, simply is that it's not a caravan. And that is a very negative response. In fact, the policies discriminate against high quality new build. Now, that's not the intention of either Shropshire Council, as far as I know it, for encouraging tourism, nor the local councils and central government for generating a betterment in all built form. So I do think that it must be weighed up, and I find it's difficult because officers are stuck with the policies which are 10 years and 7 years old now in the core strategy in the Sandev. Obviously, COVID was not expected. Nobody could have expected that. When it came into effect, it was nearly 3 years ago now, and there's been no attempt to provide new planning guidance to give an update so that they could get this balance between what used to exist as a holiday thing and what's needed now. People won't go abroad now for various reasons. They used to go to luxury villas and so on. This provides an opportunity to reflect that in the countryside without detriment or harm to the visual appearance of the area or to any other neighbouring property. Now, it is very well designed. We mentioned that it's got a green roof. I mean, to go on to that, it's going to be a grass roof, which will then have meadow flowers and so on. So to play it down even more, it's within easy travelling distance of Much Wenlock. It isn't walkable because there's no footpaths, which would be expected if it was a dwelling, but it's not. So I would urge members to support the proposal, and it could be that this could then be used as a standard for future such facilities. Thank you very much.
Any questions? Thank you very much. Councillor Wynne, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just to clarify on the distance, it's not far. We just worked it out on my learned friend here. It's 2.4 miles. Is that too far away? I'm not quite sure if it is. Thank you. Just to clarify that.
Good. Councillor Potter, please.
Thank you very much. I think looking at this, there's already established holiday accommodation on this site which people drive to. We've got to look at Much Wenlock as being a tourist and a jewel in the crown of Shropshire from a tourist point of view. It's the sort of place that you generally tend to have to drive to. It doesn't have a train link anymore. Public transport is less than generous, shall we say. Yet it is, the rural economy relies on tourism in Shropshire, and it is significantly important in the emerging economic strategy which this council is bringing forward. I think the fact that there's a holiday accommodation already cited here, people are already using it, the impact is positive according to the local member and the town council. I think this is the design and nature of it looks interesting and is going to be attractive to people to come and stay in Shropshire and hopefully spend their money in Shropshire. I think this is the sort of development that we should be supporting. I understand again where there's an issue here with policy, and sometimes the policy isn't quite right. And I hope with the emerging local plan, we will see taken into account the nature in which the policies can be changed and adapted to meet the growing requirements of a thriving rural economy and rural communities. So I would be more than happy to support this this application.
Yeah, I'm of a similar view, but I wouldn't want us to see developers be able to drive a coach and horses through this particular policy. So I would seek to distinguish the reasons why we are prepared to waive what is in MD 11 with regards to the caravan. And I think there are a number of things. There are no consultee objections. There are no public objections. This is zero carbon build, which I think should be encouraged and that we would look favourably on in the future. There are no issues with regard to local residents or to traffic. And so I would, and also we feel that this would probably get through under the proposed new local plan. And so on those grounds and those grounds alone, that's how I would distinguish why we don't apply MD 11 in this case.
Okay. Councillor Thornby, please.
Having visited the site though, I have got some concerns because you've got that paddock that the existing two lets look over that paddock and then to the open countryside, and it sort of blends in. And if you look at the proposal, they're going to be looking out the window at Teletubby land, in effect, unless it's done really well. Now, I appreciate that it could be. My main concern would be overdevelopment of that site. I just wondered if we approved it, whether we could put something else in to say, or an advisory that we think that would be at maximum capacity. And also, I'd like something in there, if we approved it, to the effect that we don't remove the soil from the site. If the whole idea is to blend it all in and create nice mounds, that the soil stays on the site, which cuts down the transport.
Thank you. Anyone else to speak, please? Proposal?
I'm happy to propose that, and just to sort of link in with Councillor Parsons' point, I think the reason why we're diverging from the policy is, because there's already an established holiday accommodation there. So had this been a completely greenfield site, we'd perhaps look at it very differently. But there's already one there, so I'm happy to propose we accept this application.
I'll second. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Parsons. Do you want to come back?
Yeah, I've just asked committee that officers are given delegated powers to put the planning condition schedule together, including those to the advisory note that was suggested about capacity of the site, and the additional one regarding the retention of soil in situ.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Yeah. Okay. So we can propose and second to over to a recommendation of the officers to go with the application to approve it.
Okay, so if you could indicate whether you're voting for, against or abstaining. Caroline Bagnall.
For.
Andy Boddington.
For.
Roger Evans.
For.
Nick Hignett.
For.
Nigel Lumby.
For.
Ed Potter,
4.
Tony Parsons,
4.
Mark Williams,
4.
Paul Wynne,
4.
and David Evans.
4.
Okay, that's unanimous.
Lovely, thank you. Next item on the agenda is affordable dwellings.
Next slide, please. Thank you. So, members visited this site this morning, and it's sort of just south of Ridgenorth on the just off the Highland Road. It relates to the proposal for erection of a detached single-storey affordable dwelling under council's single plot exception policy. The dwelling would be located within a corner of the field adjoining an access track, which is also a bridle way, which ultimately joins the B4364 Ridgenorth to Clebury Road. So the track currently serves 5 dwellings it's centred around Uplands Barn, including the applicant's current home with his family. The council's affordable housing team confirmed that the applicant has demonstrated housing need and strong local connections and a need to live in the local area. Due to issues of availability, he's unable to meet this housing need within the parish without assistance from the affordable housing policy. The rights of way have concerns that there should be a need to demonstrate right of vehicular access along the bridle way. The agent has come back and said that that's normally something that wouldn't be kind of materially determining an application and can be confirmed following any decision. I don't think at the moment there's any evidence either way. Clearly, there's a lot of all the traffic that actually goes up that road to the 5 properties and the farm business has a right of passage over the bridleway. So the site lies in countryside where policy CS5 permits limited local needs affordable housing on exception sites that accord with policy CS11, namely in and adjoining recognisable named settlements. In this particular case, the main issues, the 2 real only issues, does the applicant fulfil the requirements of the policy with regard to this being in local housing need, having strong local connections, and whether or not the site accords with the requirements of the policy in terms of location. So it's clear that the applicant, Mr. Groves, does meet the requirements as confirmed by the county's affordable housing team. He's in partnership with his brother. They run the livestock business with 900 ewes, I think it is, that were mentioned this morning, from Uplands Barn within the parish. And they need to be in proximity to the place of work due to animal welfare considerations. It's preferable for Mr. Groves to live just a short distance from his livestock. However, the application is not being justified on an essential rural workers need. It is being justified in this instance on a single plot rural exception policy, which is a form of affordable housing for a dedicated individual. So in relation to the second test, the applicant must demonstrate the proposed exception site is in a location that demonstrably forms part of or adjoins a recognised named settlement. So the council's SBD on type and affordable housing advises in this respect that the settlement always comprises a group of houses occupied by households from different families, and the group becomes a settlement due to the number and proximity of the houses in the group. And this is a matter of judgment ultimately in each case, particularly where you have a small and or dispersed settlement. And it's really based on a combination of these 2 factors. In this case, the officer position, predictably, hard line in terms of the policy, is that the site is not sufficiently close to named settlements nearby. So you have Glazley, which is a fairly small hamlet, and then Chelmarsh, which is a bigger property beyond, which lies over 1 kilometre away. So it's in this sort of loose aggregation of 5 properties that's centred around Uplands Barn. So it's in a relatively isolated position also in relation to the nearest 5 dwellings, and as such is considered to represent an intrusion in open countryside from an officer perspective. Notwithstanding that, if we can look at the next slide, please. So the scale of the proposed single-storey property would be in accordance with the affordable single plot exception policy, and we accept that it would not have significant visual impact because you could put landscaping in to assimilate the property, and we accept that there is a local need for the applicants. So it all boils down really to whether or not the Uplands is a named settlement. And if so, you know, the extent to which it meets that second locational criteria. So I think I've probably said what I was going to say in my conclusion there. I'm not going to bore members any longer. I will finish now, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Ed. Right, we've got Councillor Robert Tyndall, a local member, and you have 5 minutes to address the committee, please.
Nice to see you all again. I hope you think it's nice to see me again. Perhaps one or two of you don't. I missed you. Now then, let me remind myself.
Right hand side.
I'm also speaking with their permission or at their request on behalf of the local parish council, which is Chalmarsh. And it's all a bit confusing because some people, including myself, initially thought it was Glazely. Glazely is part of a different cluster of parish councils, along with Billingsgate and a couple of others. So this is in Chalmarsh Parish Council, and the Chalmarsh Parish Council have no objection. In fact, they support the application. So I'm pleased to be able to report that on their behalf. I would contend that the Uplands are in fact is a settlement, and as the local member, I know this area well, and I know that local people regard this area as the Uplands, and it's not Glazely, and I'm not for one moment suggesting it has an association with Glazely. It is its own settlement. The planning officer in her report mentions Uden Burnell, which is actually due west, and is tiny, and I don't think is relevant. It is actually due west. The houses in Uplands, when I went round to have a look, I spoke to a number of the householders, and they were quite content with the prospect of an affordable dwelling, and they are all unrelated to each other. So I think, despite the small size of the settlement, it is genuinely a settlement in accordance with Shropshire Council's policies. And you may remember, many of you on this committee, that we have given permission for affordable dwellings in fairly sort of remote places. I mean, they are near to or within village signs, but we have interpreted this policy reasonably liberally in order to provide affordable accommodation, particularly for young people, but not only young people. It can be for elderly people who want to just downsize. The sorry, I just have to look at my notes because they will bear with me. Yes, sorry. The planning officer has suggested that the design is appropriate. Nothing wrong with that. So the only thing I really need to ask the committee to do is to consider whether it falls within, albeit our reasonably liberal interpretation of the policy for affordable house. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions, please, Robert?
Well, I just add, Chairman, there was a slight red herring regarding whether it was going to be an agricultural dwellings house. That was unfortunate. Yes, they do farm. The two brothers do farm, but they're young men now in their 20s. They don't want to live at home and farm. So farming is the principal economic reason why they want to live there, but they're not seeking an agricultural dwelling. They're seeking an affordable dwelling from where, indeed, they can manage their agricultural activities.
Okay.
That probably confuses it even more, but I thought I would make that.
Okay. Thank you. Right. They're calling the agent, please. Diane and Chris. Thank you. You have 3 minutes to address the committee, please, Diane.
Thank you, Chair. The application is submitted under the guidance offered in the Council's adopted supplementary planning document for affordable single plot exception sites. In this case, it has been evidence that the applicant is in housing need, has strong local connections with the parish council and local member confirming, and has a genuine need to reside in the immediate locale. As such, Jack is wholly policy compliant. In relation to the site, the Council's adopted policy offers the following advice. A settlement always comprises a group of houses occupied by households from different families. The policy explains that where the number of houses is small or where the houses are dispersed, it is the combination of both these factors that determines whether the dwellings constitute a settlement. The policy further advises that because a settlement is a relationship between different properties, the limits of the settlement are defined by where that relationship peters out. This will be further informed by the settlement pattern and also by the views of the local community. In relation to the Uplands, it has been evidenced that within the settlement there are 5 houses. These 5 houses are a loose-knit group, clearly forming a group, clearly having a relationship one with another. The precise limit of the settlement boundary for the Uplands is a matter of judgment. The policy emphasises that this judgment should be informed by the local member and the parish council, who are best placed to understand these relationships within their communities. In this instance, both the local member and the parish council support this site. In settlements that are loose-knit in character, the policy advises that it is acceptable for an exception site to be a short distance from that settlement. This plot is approximately 80 metres from the Uplands cottages to the southwest and 160 metres from the Uplands to the south. It's therefore considered that whilst this site doesn't immediately adjoin another residential property, it remains wholly policy compliant. Officers are advised to seek the view of the local member at the pre-application stage. This was done and the local member supported this site. The application has also been wholly supported by the parish council. It is therefore disappointing that the officers have not aligned their views and consequently their recommendation with that of both the parish council and the local member as the policy advises. Clearly, isolated remote sites should be resisted. This site is neither. It is well grouped with existing buildings and the design has been kept single storey to assist with its assimilation into the wider landscape. It is hoped, therefore, that the Planning Committee will approve this application for an affordable dwelling made in response to an identified local need.
Thank you.
Chair.
Any questions, please?
Okay, can I ask, is there any photographs agreeing with this one?
I sadly not. The members did visit the site this morning.
Chairman, may I permit to just explain why I wasn't on the site visits?
Can do, yeah.
Just I was attending Councillor Les Winwood's funeral,
Oh, right.
and I just thought that that was important as he was my neighbouring councillor and a good friend and guider of Robert Tyndall.
Actually, there may be photo. Tim, could we just fast forward to see whether there's? Right. So there are. Miracle. So this is the access point in, which is also bridle way. It's a generally open aspect of the fields. This is the actual site itself that members saw. Just one observation is it's quite open. It doesn't have a clear boundary on the far side, although it's bounded by fences on the other two. The field to the left is arable and is not owned by the Uplands enterprise, which is so primarily a sheep farming enterprise. I think that there would be merit in having a landscaping condition where members minded to go against the officer recommendation. But ultimately, you can also see that it is in a relatively isolated location, but it's a matter of planning judgment.
Can I also ask, it's clearly a farmer's son, as they're farmers and they wanted a local needs dwelling. I can understand that because in my opinion, sheep don't demonstrate an essential need, to be fair, functional need. What I was wondering is, there are a group of dwellings the other side of the road. I take it from looking at the first plan.
Correct.
So
Yeah,
I was wondering, do they own land where the dwellings are?
Yes, they own.
So why isn't it, why isn't it?
Side of the right hand side.
So why isn't it sited alongside the existing dwellings? Because what I'm saying is it's an open countryside.
We have to judge the application that's before us, and in this particular case, it has a physical relationship with the barn building and the focal point for the sheep farming enterprise.
Yeah. Chairman, on a point of order, I really think planning officer should have started introducing that. It's not his case, it's Graham Prince's. I've noticed you scowling and thumping your papers down throughout the whole of this afternoon. Don't, please.
Excuse me, I'm the planning manager. I
behave like
interject
one.
when you guys.
Robert, thank you. Right. Who wants to open up the debate? Councillor Evans.
Right, thank you, Chairman. This type of settlement is prevalent in many different places in Shropshire. I heard the comment about liberal assessment of settlements. I think this is typical of many settlements. There are some in my area, and I think it would satisfy the criteria of settlements. It isn't in wide open countryside with no houses around it. Uplands is similar to many others throughout the rural parts of Shropshire, and it should be encompassed in our policy. I was involved for my sins in the original policy, which is now being under discussion here with others of cross-party, and it was this sort of settlement which we thought needed to be able to become that mixed community, that balanced community that everybody want, to enable the communities to continue to exist. Otherwise, everybody there will be in grey haired and old like I am. You need that balance to make that community viable, sustainable, and this is where we are for this.
I agree with Councillor Evans on this, and I have a differing view on the sheep enterprise. It's obviously established local need. Sheep have two main aims in life. One is get out and one is die. You have to watch them, you have to be near them, and 900 is not an insignificant number. And actually for a modern farming enterprise, you need to be on the button with it, and that means being on site, and that is all year round. And I know there is a differing opinion there. I come from a farming family, and that's my opinion. And I'm happy to support this.
Thank you. Can I just add, please? I wasn't debating with what I'm saying is this is for a local needs dwelling. That's fine. Yeah. I'm not questioning that. I'm saying it's for local needs rather than an agricultural, and not to get confused between the two.
Okay.
Okay. I'm prepared to propose that we support it, Chairman.
Okay. With the condition of local needs and
and it being a recognised settlement known locally to the local member and the community.
Okay. I'm happy to second that. Yeah, that's pretty through. We could propose and second it.
Delegation for
delegated conditions, do you?
Yes, please. Yes, I'm sorry, I was in the world of my own. Yeah, delegated conditions. I also suggested the need for landscaping conditions.
Yeah, all right, yeah.
And section 6.
Oh, section 1 and 6.
Yeah, obviously.
Yes, obviously that, yes. Okay, you happy with that, Roger?
Yeah.
Right, we'll take the vote then, please.
Okay, so if you can indicate whether you're voting for or against the proposal. Caroline Bagnall.
For.
Andy Waddington.
For.
Roger Evans.
For.
Nick Hignett.
For.
Nigel Lumby.
For.
Ed Potter.
For.
Tony Parsons.
For.
Mark Williams.
For.
Paul Wynn.
For.
And David Evans.
For.
Okay, so that's unanimous.
Okay, now we'll schedule the field. Note another or not?
Very quickly, there's one appeal just to advise members on that. That is for replacement dwelling at Hordley, which is just off the Church Stretton Road. Basically, the property, we refused it. It was the original property was 100 square metres or thereabouts. The new property was 225 square metres. We refused it on policy grounds because it was too great, NG7A. What actually happened was that the inspector allowed it based on his opinion that it didn't actually intrude externally. It could be slotted into the site that it was in. So I think this is slightly disconcerting because it does tend to suggest that our spatial parameters for these types of developments are being eroded a bit. And I think perhaps the officers need to kind of be a bit more circumspect when they're refusing things purely on the grounds of space. If there is an extenuating reason why it can be properly integrated, I think increasingly inspectors now are recognising the need for modern standards of living in dwellings, and that sometimes, depending upon the type of dwelling, 100 square metres may not be sufficient. It's another case of the policies moving, I think, but I think that it is slightly disconcerting. That's what I will say.
Thank you, Glenn. Right, date of the next meeting is November the 15th, that's on Tuesday. I'd like to thank all the committee for attending today, starting up Tuesday as well. I'd like to thank all those who came on the site visit this morning, the officers with all the work. And wish you all a safe journey home. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.